Thank you, Marjorie. Good morning and welcome to worship. We're glad that you're here. If you all please stand if you are able, and we will do the call to worship. You can find it in your bulletin or on the wall. All runners run the race.
We will run to win.
We run not for a temporary crown, which will fade away.
We will run for the eternal crown, which will last forever.
We are free and belong to no one.
We make ourselves servants of all.
We will live for the glory of God, and we will live for our neighbor's good. Let us all pray together. God be in our heads and in our thinking. God be in our eyes and in our looking. God be in our mouths and in our speaking. God be in our hearts and in our loving. God be in our end and in our departing. In Jesus' name, amen. And please remain standing for the opening hymn. You may be seated. To excel means to go above and beyond. In this season of 4-H projects, graduations, scholarships, and award ceremonies, we recognize those that excel as those who go above and beyond. In 2 Corinthians 8:7, Paul writes, "But just as you excel in everything, in faith, in speech, in knowledge, in complete earnestness, and in your love for us, see that you also excel in this grace of giving." Giving is a grace that God gives us, and we are encouraged to excel in this grace of giving, or to go above and beyond in our giving, as Paul wrote earlier in this chapter. speaking of the Macedonian churches in 2 Corinthians 8:3. For I testify that they gave as much as they were able, and even beyond their ability. In other words, they went above and beyond. They excelled in their giving. Let us today also excel, or to go above and beyond in our giving. Our special offering for this month is Timbercrest Senior Living, which is in Manchester. It was established by Brethren, and Timbercrest provides independent and assisted living, as well as a rehab to home, health care, and a memory care. This will be our last Sunday this month for this special offering. You may give your regular offering in the offering plate and your special offering for Timbercrest in the service cup in the back of the sanctuary, or you may also give on Tithely, the Tithely app. Now let's go to our scripture reading for today, which is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 19 to 27. Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone, to win as many as possible. To the Jews, I became like a Jew, to win the Jews. To those under the law, I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law, I became like one not having the law, though I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak, I became weak, to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. I do all this for the sake of the gospel, that I may share in its blessings. Do you not know that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever. Therefore, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. I do not fight like a man beating the air. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that after I have preached to others, I myself will not be disqualified for the prize. Amen.
I like that slide. Well, good morning. Congratulations to our graduating seniors and our College Scholarship Award winners. Since we are having a special Sunday, I decided to preach a special sermon titled Run to Win. It's the same title and the same general outline I used a few weeks back for Thomas McMullen's ordination service. So while I'm preaching a little bit differently in this sermon, I felt that the sermon would take too much extra time to prepare, and I thought it was nice to fit our high school graduates and College Scholarship Award winners together. So one thing all of our current graduates and students have in common is they were all runners. So I thought this theme fit very well. We had everybody here were runners, and they were good runners. So this is a topic and title I thought would fit the message well today. As I think about graduating high school and starting college, I think back to my own high school graduation, which was 25 years ago this month. I graduated at 17 years old from Redford Thurston High School just outside Detroit, Michigan in June of 1996. June 6th was my award ceremony. Recently, when I went to visit my mom for Memorial Day, I found my senior awards night program. And I was actually surprised when I looked back at how many awards I had actually won. And many of them had to do with being a student athlete. I had forgotten I'd gotten so many, and as I entered into Central Michigan University and began attending college, I was considering pursuing one of the following career paths: broadcasting, journalism, marketing, or secondary education. I ended up graduating with a secondary education degree with a history major and a speech and drama minor. And at first, I was going to be an English major under secondary education. But after back-to-back C-minuses in English, I thought that was a bad idea. While my interest in sports has waned since being in college, I did get the opportunity to write for my school sports page. And that was always a dream of mine. Because when I was growing up, I would start each day by reading the sports page. When I had breakfast before I went to school, it was my routine, read the sports page. Then, if I had the opportunity before school, but for sure at night before going to bed, I would always watch ESPN Sports Center. If I was wearing clothes, it was apparel from a sports team. If I was playing in the yard, I was playing a sport. If I was playing a video game, it was a sports game. Pretty much my whole life was focused around sports, and I couldn't imagine a better job than to watch sports and either write about it or talk about it. So I was very into athletic field. Since growing up in the Detroit area, I also got interested in the Detroit teams. For those of you who do not follow football, the Detroit Lions were a really good professional team and won championships in the 1950s. Since the Super Bowl started in the 1960s, the Detroit Lions have never made it, ever. They have not even been to the Super Bowl. The farthest they got was losing in the conference championship. The first year Karen and I were married, I asked her to watch the Lions with me. We were living in Michigan at the time. They set a record that year. The first team to go 0-16. They lost every single game that year. And Karen has never wanted to watch football again. I wonder why. The Lions have tried seemingly everything to produce a winning team, and yet they still constantly, year after year, cannot win. They cannot win the Super Bowl. On the contrary, Tom Brady, who played for the University of Michigan, has won 7 Super Bowls and has been in 10. One man, Tom Brady, has won 7. The Detroit Lions have won 0. And his first year with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady won the Super Bowl. This makes many claim that he is the GOAT, or the greatest of all time. On the other hand, the Lions are competing to be the WOAT, the worst of all time. Tom Brady plays to win. And at 43, he's one of the only players I know older than me, and he is still on the top of his game and still winning. But at age 25, he made a quality decision to change his diet and change his lifestyle. And it's paid off in his ability to win. I won't get into the details of what he did, but he disciplines his body so he can win a prize, the Super Bowl, 7 times. Paul says something similar in our verse today, verse 25. He says, everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. We're almost to the Olympics again. After all, it was the Greek culture who started the Olympics. So when Paul was writing in the first century in Greek language, as one who was trained in that area, he understood how important the Olympics were. And for him, he knew that everyone who competed in the Olympics went into strict training. You don't just take years off and say, yeah, I think I'm going to go to the Olympics. Just wake up today and I'm going to win the gold medal. You have to discipline your body in order to win. Verse 24 before this says, do you not know that all the runners run in a race? But only one gets the prize. Only one gets the gold medal. Only one wins the Super Bowl. Only one is the champion. So Paul uses this analogy for us in our lives and says, run in such a way as to win the prize. Run in such a way as to win the prize. The goal for Tom Brady is not just to play in the NFL. He doesn't want to just be on the field. His goal is to win. Those who strive for the gold medal in the Olympics don't want to just be on the field. They want to win the gold medal. So the goal for our graduates The goal for those that are moving on in this next step, I encourage you, is to run to win. The first step toward being the person or the student or whatever God has called you to be is to discipline yourself. And the root of discipline is the same root as disciple. To be a disciple is to be a learner or a follower. The invitation from Jesus is for all of us to be disciples, to be learners, to be followers. In order to do this, we must participate in disciplines. In the spiritual life, there are spiritual disciplines that we must enter into if we are to be a committed disciple. Spiritual disciplines like prayer, like fasting, like Bible reading, like solitude, like accountability, and more. When I entered into college, within a few weeks, I joined a Christian fellowship, and I began to go to Bible study every week. I began to go to church every week. And in March of my freshman year of college, I got baptized. These were life-changing decisions for me. At that time, when I went into college, I didn't think I was going in to be a part of a Christian fellowship. I certainly didn't think I was going in to be a pastor. Notice that was not on my list. When I went to Central Michigan University, I did not have on my list become a pastor. If I did, I probably would not have gone to Central Michigan University. But instead, at Central Michigan University is where God found me. And God opened my heart and said, I want you to become a part of this Christian fellowship. And for everybody entering into college, the most important thing I always say is get a part of a Christian fellowship. It radically changed my life and got me committed to the things of God and got me to the point where now I have been going to church regularly, reading my Bible regularly, and committed to Jesus since that time. It radically changed my life. March 23rd, 1997, when I got baptized, a snowy Palm Sunday in the middle of Michigan. But instead of starting my day with the sports page after that, I began to start my day with the Bible and with prayer. Now, I open the Bible in the morning first thing. Now, I pray in the morning first thing. These disciplines changed my focus and changed my life. For all of us here to fulfill what God has called us to be, we must enter into spiritual disciplines. And all of us are called to be ministers. To be a minister means to be a servant, using whatever gift God has given us to serve others for the glory of God. 1 Peter 4:10 says it this way: each one of us should use whatever gift he has received to serve others. That's the goal. A lot of people have gifts in their lives. Some use it for themselves, for self-advancement, self-promotion, so they can gain out of it. Others have gifts that they bury, like the talent that got buried in the sand and never used it. Maybe they were talked out of it, maybe they were discouraged out of it, maybe they were just lazy, but for whatever reason, the talent got buried. God says, I don't want you to do either one. I don't want you using your gift just for you, and I don't want you to neglect and bury your gift. Instead, I want you to use it to serve others. Faithfully administering God's grace in its various forms. Why is it God's grace? God's grace means a gift from God. So when God gives you a gift, that's what it is, a gift. It is something God has blessed you with. So God has blessed us with the opportunity to be good at different things. And when we find out what that is, we need to discipline ourselves to use it to serve others. Verse 26. Therefore, Paul says, I do not run like a man running aimlessly. A man just running around with no purpose. There's a lot of people out there that have gifts, but they don't have a purpose. I have this gift, but I don't know what to use it for. I don't know what I'm trying to do. He says, I do not fight like a man beating the air. Right? I can be a really good boxer when no one's fighting against me. No, I beat my body, he says. He says, I make it my slave, so after I preach to others, I myself will not be disqualified. This is the ministry version of what I call gaining the whole world but losing your soul. So I encourage you, don't lose your own soul in college. Don't lose your own soul in your career. Don't lose your own soul in your family pursuits. Don't give your all just to what you do. Give your all to the person who gave you the gift. Don't lose your soul. Stay disciplined. If need be, beat your body. Make it your slave. Maintain your own spiritual disciplines. Keep your soul healthy. Keep your relationship with God on good terms. Discipline yourself to make good choices. You represent God. Just like athletes wear a name on the front of their jersey. Coaches, I know, used to like to say the name on the front of your jersey is more important than the one on the back. We live in a culture, especially in the sports world, that seems to have turned that around, where the individual name is more important, where people would rather be successful for themselves than stay committed to an organization with the jersey on the front. But in our world, we wear a jersey that says Jesus. And what we do represents him. Ephesians 4:1-2 says, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Live a life worthy of the person you represent. Live a life worthy of representing Jesus to the world. Be completely humble. He gives you 4 ways to do this. And gentle. Be patient. Bearing with one another in love. Those are 4 ways to represent Jesus well. So number 1, be disciplined. Number 2, live for the glory of God and your neighbor's good. It's a saying the brethren have used for a long time. I think it's really good. Verse 12 of 1 Corinthians 9, but we did not use this right, Paul says. What right was he talking about? If you go back in 1 Corinthians 9, I'll get back to this in a minute. He talks about as a minister, Paul had a right to take a wife with him. Paul had a right to have a family. Paul had a right to be financially supported. He says, but we did not use this right. Verse 15 again, but I have not used these rights. Why? Paul explains that. He says he was seeking a greater reward. Verse 15, I have not used any of these rights, and I'm not writing this to you in the hope that you'll do these things for me. In other words, he's not writing the Corinthian church saying, I want you now to make good on your financial support. He says, I would rather die than have anyone deprive me of this boast. Yet when I preach the gospel or the good news, I cannot boast. I am compelled to preach. Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel. But if I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. So Paul indeed was seeking a reward, but it wasn't the financial gain from the people he was preaching to. He was wanting to preach voluntarily. When you find something you will do for free, you found your passion. Because if something you really love, you really enjoy, you don't need to get paid to do it. When you have found something you really enjoy and you are passionate about that you would do for free, you have found your passion. Now let's take that a step further. When you have found something you would do for free to benefit others and to serve them, you found your calling. When you have found something you would do for free to serve others, you found your calling. Paul says here, woe to me if I do not preach. Woe to me if I don't fulfill my calling. When you think about this, what is your calling? The actual word vocation comes from the Latin word calling. It doesn't just mean a job. It doesn't just mean a career. It means a calling. What is your passion? Running, cooking, making designs, doing art, running a business, singing, farming, yard work, teaching, preaching. All of these things could be callings. So verse 18, Paul says, what then is my reward? So he's going to tell you what his reward is. Just this. That in preaching the gospel I may offer it free of charge, so not to make use of my rights in preaching it. In other words, he was living for an eternal reward. And he was living for their good. He wanted lives changed for the glory of God. Verse 17, if I preach voluntarily, I have a reward. If not voluntarily, I'm simply discharging the trust committed to me. The early brethren did not want professional preachers. They wanted preachers because they were called. So for a couple hundred years, 1708 to the early 1900s, brethren didn't pay pastors. The biggest point Paul is making in 1 Corinthians is he's writing to a selfish, self-centered, sinful, and divided church. And when you're writing to a selfish, self-centered, sinful, and divided church, he says, I want you to live for somebody else and for the glory of God. And if you look at the next several chapters, chapter 10, chapter 11, chapter 12, chapter 13, chapter 14, you put this in place, you will see that Paul is telling them, live for the glory of God and your neighbor's good. In verse 19, he says, though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave. We recently celebrated Juneteenth, national holiday now, the ending of slavery here in America. I am free, he says. I belong to no man. That's the gospel. The gospel makes you free. But then Paul says, I voluntarily make myself a slave. Not because someone else made me a slave. I make myself a slave. That's the heart of what it means to be a servant. And why did he do it? To win as many as possible. And this is what Jesus did. In our Brethren tradition, we have a beautiful picture of this. Washing one another's feet. The lowest slave was to wash the feet. Jesus, the King of all, can't think of anyone who would be more free and belong to no one. He made himself a slave and washed the feet. Not only that, he went to the cross and made himself the slave of all humanity. In Philippians 2, 5 through 7, it says, your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be grasped, but made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant or a slave. Every time we wash feet, that's what we are doing. Every time we are ministering, that's what we are doing. One of the things I'd heard from Brethren Way of Christ, that you want to know if you've got the heart of a servant? See how you respond when you're treated like one. All of us want to be treated as the one who's respected, as the one who's up top. But what does it mean to be treated like a servant? Treated like a slave? How do we run to win in ministry? By winning others to Jesus and his kingdom way of living. That's number 3. It's not about competing against others in order to win against them like sports. It's about serving others in order to gain them or win them. Peter and John's whole world were flipped around. They were fishermen, and Jesus said, I want you now to fish for people. As ministers, we are told to win people. We discipline ourselves in order to serve and win other people. Paul says, to the Jew I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To the Gentile I became like a Gentile to win the Gentiles. I became the slave of all to win as many as possible. 1 Corinthians 10, 31 through 33. Whether you eat or drink, whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God. Do not cause anyone to stumble, whether Jews or Greeks or the church of God, even as I try to please everybody in every way. I am not seeking my own good, but the good of many, so that they may be saved. In other words, Paul in 1 Corinthians 10 extends this same thought. In 10, he says, you're free to eat meat. You're free to eat meat that's been sacrificed to an idol. That's not actually sin, but it can be a hindrance to other people because they think you're worshiping the idol that the meat was dedicated to. And he says, I won't eat it if it's going to hurt somebody else. This is choosing to be a servant. This is choosing to be a slave. Why? For their benefit. Paul was not just after his own benefit. That's why he said, I don't want you to have to pay me. I don't want you to have to do this for me. I don't want to have to use my rights. I don't want to have to seek these things. I want to do it for the benefit of others. And again, if you read through 11, 13, 14, all throughout, Paul talks about head coverings, communion, love feasts, spiritual gifts, all centered around the idea in 1 Corinthians 13 of love. And I would encourage all of you here today to read through those next few chapters this week, either in one sitting or every day. Finally, let me say this, because there is another side to this. At some point, you have to be served. Be willing to be served. There's 2 sides to every coin. 2 sides to every truth. You can't just always breathe out. If you're always exhaling, you will die. It doesn't take very long, right? Just, right? At some point, you got to breathe back in. You can't just always use fuel. At some point, you need to fuel up. You can't just always serve. At some point, you need to be served. This is the other half of the feet washing lesson. Someone has to wash your feet, not just you always do the feet washing. While Paul boasted and bragged about his serving for free, he also said preachers need to be taken care of, 1 Corinthians 9:7. Who serves as a soldier at his own expense? Who plants a vineyard and does not eat of its grapes? Who tends a flock and does not drink the milk? In other words, he says you should receive something back for your labor. This is fairness, equality, and justice. It's true love. Who wants to be in a relationship where you're only on the giving side of the equation? Where the other person never gives anything back to you. They only take and take and take and take and take and take. One of the reasons Karen and I both wash each other's feet on our wedding day. To represent both giving and receiving, serving and being served. It's the heart of all good relationships. In all good relationships, there is giving and receiving, and both sides doing both. But a relationship goes bad when one side is doing all the taking and one side is doing all the serving. This is the way Paul says it should be in the church world. This is the way Paul says it should be in our callings. Not just to do the giving all the time. Verses 11 through 14, he says, if we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much to reap a material harvest from you? If others have the right of this support, shouldn't we have it all the more? Don't you know that those who serve in the temple and those who serve at the altar share in what is offered on the altar? In the Old Testament, they had a system. The Levites made sacrifices in the temple. But they also ate part of that sacrifice. That was part of how they got their food. It wasn't just being completely killed and offered to the Lord. There was food off of that the Levites ate. Now Paul makes the analogy in the same way the Lord has commanded those who preach the gospel should receive their living from the gospel. You see, this sounds like an exact contradiction to what Paul just said. Paul said he didn't make use of the rights, but he had a right to it. He said on God's side, it's commanded that people support those who are preaching the gospel. It was then Paul's choice whether or not to receive it. The congregation's command was to give. That's why paid professional ministry, I believe, is still godly. Preachers need to eat. Preachers need a home. Preachers need clothes. Preachers need transportation. In the same way, whatever it is that you do for your calling, you need to eat. You need a home. You need clothes. You need transportation. So it is good and acceptable to receive back from whatever it is that is your calling. But that's not the reason to do it. Again, 1 Corinthians 9:9 says, to muzzle the ox while it's treading out the grain is a bad thing. In other words, he's saying, make sure the person who's fulfilling the calling is healthy enough to fulfill the calling. It applies to all careers and vocations, not just preachers. While your calling is what you are passionate about doing, you would do it for free, and at times you may offer it as a service to others for free. At some point, you need to receive something back. It's right and good to receive an honorable support for your work. In other words, your calling is not what you do to get a paycheck, that's a job. A job is something you do to get a paycheck. And don't get me wrong, there are times you just need to get a paycheck. But a calling, a ministry, a vocation is more than a job. And be willing to accept an honest compensation for your calling. Don't just breathe out, also breathe in. Don't just give, also receive. So the church has taken a small step today. We have given you support. $1,000, I know, doesn't go far in today's college world. But we are giving you something to say we want to help you. We're giving you something to say we want to support you. We want you to get what you need to fulfill your calling. We want you to have the benefit of being provided for to fulfill your calling. And we can't do it ourselves completely, but we can give you a small step in that direction. So every time you receive a check of support from us, know that we are supporting you and encouraging you. Know that we are praying for you and we are here for you. Know that we want you to fulfill your calling. So be disciplined, live for the glory of God, your neighbor's good. Seek to win your neighbors to Christ and be willing to be served. If you do, I believe you will run to win and you'll receive the eternal rewards that God has for you. Let's pray. God, we come to you now in the name of Jesus, and we thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to run to win. All of us in this room have a calling. Some of us maybe at the beginning of that, some of us maybe toward the end, or maybe finding a new calling at this stage in our life, a new direction, a new purpose you have for us, something we may not have thought about before. But whatever it is, God, I pray that we would use the gift you've given us to serve others for your glory, and then receive back what we need so that we can be provided for. But ultimately, God, we seek the reward that only you can give. In Jesus' name, amen. So to finish off with our theme today, we'll do verses 1, 3, 4, and 6. And we're going to do Guide My Feet, number 546.
Please stand. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. While I run this race, stand by me. While I run this race, stand by me. While I run this race, for I don't want to run this race alone. I'm your child while I run this race. I'm your child while I run this race. I'm your child while I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race, for I don't want to run this race in vain.
May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you, and the Lord turn his face toward you and give you grace as you run the race that God has called you to run. God bless you.